If you were a wrestling fan in the 80s or the 90s, it would be impossible not to have heard the name Bobby the Brain Heenan. Thanks for tuning into another special episode of Tyler Vance Rants. I am your host, Tyler Vance himself, and you're not. It is October 2nd, 1984. Do you like what I've done with the place? It has been 1 month since last we saw Tuesday Night Titans, and while Vince McMahon himself said 3 weeks,
we'll return in 3 weeks.
It's not like he ever lied to us before, right? The liar himself, Vince McMahon, along with Lord Awful Alfred Hayes, once more host Tuesday Night Titans, and they send us on a road trip alongside Mean Gene Okerlund as the show begins. Our destination? West Texas, and more specifically, the ranch belonging to half of the WWF Tag Team Champions, Dick Murdoch.
According to these directions, I'm supposed to be able to find Dick Murdoch around here.
The trip was recently brought up in this past week's regular episode on WWF Championship Wrestling, where it was mentioned on the WWF update, but now we get to experience the road trip in its full glory.
Ladies and gentlemen, I sure hope that we're getting a little closer to finding Dick Murdoch.
It's interesting because if you remember a few weeks ago, before Tuesday Night Titans went on its hiatus, we had a guided tour of New York by the other half of the WWF Tag Team Champions, native New Yorker himself, Adrian Adonis. So this is a complete 180 reversal, and I am very much looking forward to seeing what the difference is between New York City and rural West Texas. And if you haven't seen that episode, I'll link it down below for your viewing pleasure. We're not gonna find towering skyscrapers or busy streets in West Texas, as Gene Okerlund himself finds out that the hard way, as he once more finds himself lost.
Hey, we're not on TV or anything like that. I'm not gonna
I guarantee you this won't be on TV.
This time I wouldn't recommend insulting the aesthetic of Texas or its local populace, Mean Gene. You may just get a gun in your face. After traveling for most of the day and getting absolutely nowhere, Texas is huge, Gene Okerlund finds his path blocked by some kids on horses who have brought an extra horse along with them, and apparently they have been instructed to wait for Mean Gene Okerlund and lead him the rest of the way on horseback right to Dick Murdoch.
Where in the world is Dick Murdoch? Do you have any idea?
Yes, sir. He's over there working some cattle. But don't worry, we got a horse.
You got a horse for me? Really? I think this is above and beyond the call of duty.
Thankfully, these kids weren't just bandits hoping to take advantage of a lost old man, and actually live up to their promise of taking Okerlund right to Murdoch, who starts the interview with Okerlund off by saying he loves the fresh air of his native state of Texas compared to the polluted cesspools like Chicago and New York. Yeah, you heard me right. Polluted cesspools.
You like the clean, fresh air and none of the slums like you got up north. Take a deep breath. Take a deep breath. Have you ever been anywhere that's got this fresh or clean air? Tell me the truth now, Gene.
Well, it's great that we found Dick Murdoch. Where's Adrian Adonis?
Where's Murdoch? There's the only thing that grows in this place is dirt. What I wouldn't give for a subway system now. Where is that cab? What I wouldn't give for a cab. What grows out here? Who lives out here?
Adonis has a point. How do people in Texas get around? Have you people never heard of the word infrastructure? While waiting for his partner's arrival, Dick Murdoch shows Mean Gene Okerlund around his ranch and takes time to explain just why the mural of John Wayne in his living room is one of the greatest things to ever happen to Dick Murdoch.
You doggone right, Gene. John Wayne, to me, was the greatest thing that ever happened to America.
If you ask me, the greatest thing to ever happen to the United States of America was when Tim Hortons invaded some of your northern states and showed you people just what good coffee actually tastes like, as opposed to that Dunkin' crap. Finally, Adrian Adonis and Dick Murdoch had their long-awaited reunion, and the trio of the WWF Tag Team Champions and Mean Gene Okerlund spend the rest of the day doing very important Texan activities, like chewing tobacco, shooting guns, and wrangling bulls. Yeehaw! I hate Texas. Thankfully, we can head back to civilization in the Tuesday Night Titans studio, where Vince McMahon's first guest of the night is the man I mentioned at the very beginning of the episode, Bobby the Brain Heenan.
Based upon the reception that you just received, Mr. Heenan, it would seem to be grown accustomed to, have you not?
Well, all my life I've grown accustomed to this. People have been jealous of me.
I can totally relate to Mr. Heenan having people jealous of him. I get it all the time. I can be walking down the street and somebody will recognize me and go, "Oh, hey, Tyler Vance, sign my shirt. Here's my baby. Take a photo. Can I get your autograph?" But the moment I tell them to take a hike, it's all, "Oh, you're a hack, Tyler Vance, you stupid Canadian." Jealousy, that's all it is. The first question that Vince McMahon asked Bobby Heenan is why the Brain sees himself as an intellectual when it comes to the sport of professional wrestling. You don't have to have a brain to figure that one out. Bobby Heenan has managed dozens of wrestlers to championship gold in the small amount of time that he's been in the business. In fact, the man that Bobby the Brain Heenan currently manages, Big John Studd, was in possession of Hulk Hogan's WWF Championship belt the night that Heenan debuted. Sure, Big John Studd won the match via countout, but that's only due to the fact that that coward Hulk Hogan couldn't beat the big man while under the management of Bobby the Brain Heenan, so he tucked tail and ran for the hills, leaving his WWF Championship behind. All this was possible thanks to the intellect that the Brain possesses. Vince McMahon then shows a brief piece of footage where Bobby the Brain Heenan was referred to as a weasel by the crowd on that particular night. I don't even think I've seen a weasel in real life, but Bobby Heenan says that the morons in the crowd call him that is due to the animal's reputation of being a scheming sneak.
Weasel's a thing that at night sneaks into a chicken house and gets his prey. He's a thing that does things behind people's back. I'm not a weasel, but people think I am, like I told you before, because they're jealous of me.
Pop goes the weasel.
Has anyone told you how much of a loser you are, Lord Alfred Hayes? Taking a break from the studio, we're in the ring next as Alexis Smirnoff takes on Sergeant Slaughter in singles competition. And as he makes his way down to the ring, the Cobra Corps Commandant does his regular routine of kissing every single American flag that the Marine passes. Sergeant Slaughter apparently even has the time to stop and shake Vince McMahon's hand at the announce table, almost yanking Vince's arm right out of its socket. Smirnoff gets tired of waiting, and so he drops an axe handle down onto Sergeant Slaughter and gets an upper hand as the match begins. Sergeant Slaughter fights back by whipping the Russian with his belt, and from there manages to maintain complete control of the match. Alexis Smirnoff is then thrown outside of the ring and has his head smashed into the announce table before Sergeant Slaughter uses one of those dumb American flags from the crowd and taunts the Russian with it. Now, that's just dumb. Who would use their flag to rub their nationality into somebody else's face? Grow up. Once back in the ring, the Slaughter cannon from Sergeant Slaughter is enough to put Alexis Smirnoff down for the 3 count. Despite this, the Russian is not finished with the Marine just yet. Smirnoff attacks Sergeant Slaughter with his boot once the match is concluded, which to me is no different from when the Cobra Corps Commandant whipped the Russian with his belt like an idiot. You know what they say, all's fair in love and war. Sergeant Slaughter is cut wide open as a result of this, but he somehow manages to withstand the punishment, most likely due to the fact that his chin took the brunt of the action, and sends Alexis Smirnoff flying with a haymaker. Back in the TNT studio, Vince McMahon's next guest is another American idiot, and this time it's B. Brian Blair, who just so happens to mention that old Granny Dearest loves watching Tuesday Night Titans.
You know, my grandmother, I'm real proud of my grandparents. They're very close to me, and she watches the show.
Well, I hope that your grandmother loves watching you and your tag team partner, Spike Huber, get absolutely decimated by the Moondogs, Rex and Spot, in tag team action next, Brian. The match is joined in progress, and both B. Brian Blair and Spike Huber actively ignore the referee's calls for the illegal man to return to his corner as the duo stretch Moondog Rex's legs as far apart as they possibly can. If I were the official in charge, I would have ended the match right then and there, and also issued B. Brian Blair and Spike Huber a fine and a suspension. But as it is, the match is allowed to continue, but thankfully, Moondog Rex is able to wiggle his way over to his corner to tag Spot in. Moondog Spot is able to gain control of the match for his team as he goes up to the top rope and drops a fist right down onto Huber's face for a 2 count. Since he stubbornly hung on, both Moondogs then take turns absolutely brutalizing Huber, who gets so dazed at one point that he misses a wild haymaker like a moron. Spot goes for another pin following a power slam on Huber, but this time B. Brian Blair interrupts the count. Huber is then able to roll out of both of the Moondogs' grip and gets a match-saving tag to his tag team partner. Brian Blair quickly puts one of the Moondogs into an abdominal stretch and goes for the pin. However, Spike Huber is still so dazed and out of it that he distracts the referee long enough for the ref to miss the pin. It doesn't seem to matter though, as the Moondogs prove to be their own worst enemies, leading to B. Brian Blair securing the victory for his team. Oh, I'd bet Grandma Blair loved that. Well, at least one of the viewers watching Tuesday Night Titans is happy. Now that we're back in the TNT studio, B. Brian Blair continues to be an aggravation to my senses as he then goes on to demonstrate his amateur wrestling skills against Bob Bradley. Blair goes through the motions and demonstrates different holds and techniques, explaining each of them to Vince McMahon and Lord Awful Alfred Hayes. Brian even says that he hopes that no children watching attempt to emulate what he's doing, as it takes years of training and practice to perfect.
Now, I hope none of you kids out there do this because it takes a lot of practice and a lot of hard work to do this, and you can really get hurt on this.
Mail time. And the first question asked this week is whether or not it's true Don Morocco has hired on Mr. Fuji to serve as his full-time manager. Something that Vince McMahon confirms.
Roberta, yes, indeed, of course, that is true.
We already knew this. What a stupid question. The next question asks whether or not there is a blossoming romance coming between WWF Champion Hulk Hogan and WWF Women's Champion Wendy Richter, as the fan in question thought he noticed some chemistry between the duo on a recent episode of Tuesday Night Titans.
I don't know if there's a budding romance between these two champions. I would doubt very seriously that there'd be much of a romance there, because I don't think there's really time for a romance.
No.
Look, Vince, just because you neglect your wife and kids by putting your career first doesn't mean that everybody does the same. The next guest on Tuesday Night Titans is the first ever man to be crowned the WWF Champion. Nature Boy Buddy Rogers. Lord Awful Alfred Hayes begins his routine of kissing butt by listing off all of the accomplishments that Buddy Rogers has gained throughout his storied career, while also taking the opportunity to throw shade at the now competition of the WWF, the NWA.
Pacific Coast Champion, East Coast Champion, Texas State Champion, Rocky Mountains, Southern States. He was the only wrestler ever to hold the WWF and the what is that?
NWA.
Yes, NWA.
Vince McMahon and I don't agree on a lot of things, but I will admit that Vince has a point when he states that he doesn't believe that many, if any, of Buddy Rogers' accomplishments and records will ever be beaten. And in response to this, the Nature Boy simply states that you have to be fully dedicated and determined, no matter what it is that you do, if you plan on being successful.
Being dedicated and really loving what you do. You gotta love what you do, and that goes for anything you do. If you're not dedicated, you're not gonna make it.
Great words of advice, and I guess that's why Buddy Rogers himself never made it properly as a manager when he managed Jimmy Superfly Snuka. The Nature Boy realized there was a lot more money to be made by opening up his own wrestling school, dedicating himself fully to that while dropping Superfly Snuka like a bad habit. Buddy Rogers' son David is then invited onto the stage, and he states that as one of Buddy Rogers' students at the professional wrestling school that the Nature Boy just opened, he trains just as well as he used to wrestle. Tough.
Yeah, he trains like he used to wrestle.
David Rogers then shows off his body and shows just what can happen to you after simply a year of training under Nature Boy Buddy Rogers. Did David Rogers' chiseled physique do it for you in the last interview? If so, then you're in for a treat, you sick freak, as Vince McMahon and Bobby the Brain Heenan introduce a new segment to Tuesday Night Titans.
This is our Hearts and Flowers segment, as you can
see by this rather lavish set.
The difference between regular fan mail time is that this segment is focused solely around questions of love. The first question asks whether or not it's true that professional wrestlers make great lovers. What the hell?
Well, let's put it this way. I will say yes, they do make great lovers. They're the second best lovers in the world.
Who would be the first?
Managers.
The second writer states that her husband doesn't make love to her anymore and asks for advice? What the
You hop out of that rocker, probably rip off that wool shawl she's wearing, take the bun out of her hair, and maybe put some nice cologne on. You ever heard of Evening in Paris?
The last question we have for you, Mr. Heenan.
Thank God.
Well, do you find this offensive?
I find it boring.
I wouldn't say it's boring, but it's definitely awkward. The third and final question has the writer state that her husband has a big, huge 6-inch scar across his face, and it's a major turnoff for her. And since wrestlers are known to have scars all over their bodies, how can she go about getting over it? I thought chicks dug scars.
Let's put it this way to the poor old soul. She should probably be thankful that he has 6 inches of anything, whether it's on his face or in the backyard or in the garage. Because she sounds like a very lonely lady. I suggest she puts a bag over his head.
The final guest of Tuesday Night Titans this week is the Iron Sheik, who's moved in and made himself right at home. This is how the former WWF champion spends his time outside of training and inside the squared circle, and it's all for one goal: relaxation. However, there are two individuals that the Iron Sheik finds he has a hard time relaxing whenever they're on his mind. And these two individuals are Sergeant Slaughter and the WWF champion, Hulk Hogan. If you've been following my regular weekly episodes and even some of the special ones, you'll know that the Cobra Corps Commandant has routinely attacked the Iron Sheik's background and culture, all in the name of Americana. As for Hulk Hogan, he stole the Iron Sheik's WWF championship and is a no-good rotten thief. The Iron Sheik was supposed to defend his WWF championship against Bob Backlund, not Hogan. We're then shown footage of a match which perfectly demonstrates what the Iron Sheik is capable of when he has the time to properly train for an opponent that decides they're going to actually show up and compete, as he takes on Billy Travis in one-on-one competition. Travis is able to hit the former WWF champion with a crossbody, but it doesn't even result in a 1 count. And from there, a massive clothesline catches Billy, which sends Travis flying out of control. To show his absolute distaste for being pitted against such a poor opponent, the Iron Sheik spits on Billy Travis, not once, but twice. And just imagine, this very well could have been Bob Backlund back on January 23rd if he had shown up. A back suplex leads right into the camel clutch as the Iron Sheik forces his pitiful opponent to submit before tossing Billy Travis outside of the ring like the trash that he is. Back in the Iron Sheik's harem, the Iron Sheik dismisses the women that have been accompanying him and grabs his Iranian clubs before issuing a challenge. However long any athlete in the world can swing his Iranian clubs, and just as a reminder, they weigh 75 pounds each, the Iron Sheik will double their time. If he can't, the former WWF champion will not only pay them $20,000, but he'll also provide pistachios, a genuine Persian rug, and even oil. What a deal! To finish the interview, the Iron Sheik introduces his personal friend and training partner.
He's not beautiful than even Sergeant Slaughter. I training with that camel.
I thought that was Sergeant Slaughter at first glance. Vince McMahon asks what Lord Awful Alfred Hayes' probably ignorant opinion is on the camel, and the Lord states that there's a peculiar aroma.
There is a most peculiar aroma.
Yes, I think we know what camel breath is all about.
You're just smelling your own breath, Alfie. Brush your teeth.
Now, Sheik, if you ever have this skinned, would you bear me in mind it may make a couple of really nice suits?
And there's the ignorant opinion that I alluded to. You're something else, Hayes. As the show comes to an end, Vince McMahon simply wants to know what the camel's name is. And so the Iron Sheik informs him that he refers to the camel as...
What is this camel's, what do you call him in Arabic?
اگر علی ساربونه میدونه شطور رو کجا بخوابونه.
What would be an American equivalent of that?
Claude.
Beg your pardon?
Claude.
And there you have it. After a month-long absence, Tuesday Night Titans returns with some hits and some misses. The misses included that Lord Awful Alfred Hayes being a genuine ignoramus. And the hits definitely had to be the trip down to West Texas as Adrian Adonis and Mean Gene Okerlund were introduced to that awful state and Dick Murdoch's ranch there. As well, we were properly introduced to Bobby the Brain Heenan. I personally think that without the Brain's attendance, Tuesday Night Titans this week would have been in complete shambles. The Brain brought a touch of class and brought some much needed intelligence to the lives of both Vince McMahon and Lord Awful Alfred Hayes. As manager to Big John Studd and already being able to force WWF champion Hulk Hogan to run for the hills in fear, who knows what else Bobby the Brain Heenan is capable of now that he's free to extend his grasp throughout the entire World Wrestling Federation. Thanks for tuning in to another special episode of Tyler Vance Rants. You can extend your own grasp throughout the world of Tyler Vance Rants by hitting the bell, liking the video, and subscribing. Don't forget to leave a comment as well. You can also demonstrate that your own intellect is on par with Bobby the Brain Heenan's by following me on social media. So long for now. Or bustling subways in rural Rescue, and the trio of the WWF Tag Team Champions and Mean Gene Okerlund, Asbestos,